Not this one, not this one.
Another Victoria thing. There's another reason I go to town. But yeah, I've got to get a new tripod. Yeah, it's another cheap tripod, but at least I got to try this one at the shop and make sure that the Canon would stay steady on it. So this will be for the talking head interviews and stuff. Golder, okay, this is the tripod, camera on the new tripod, and hopefully it won't shake during the video. This is a piece from my tikanga course. I don't really like the religious ones, you know, mentioning Jesus and all that, but I said I'd play guitar in class tomorrow, so yeah, just looked at the recording today and figured it out from there. Kyoto to kato te ata whai o tō tātou ariki a ihu karaiti me te aroha o te atua nui me te whiwhinga tahitanga ki te wairua tapu Kia tātou katoa te ata whai o tō tātou ariki aiu karaiti me te aroha o te atua nui me te whiwhinga tahitanga ki te wairua tapu ake, 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 amen. Ake, 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 amine. Kia ora. So I thought maybe, you know, if I'm going to make a documentary where the main subject is going to be gender-based discrimination or discrimination based on variations of sex characteristics, well, I thought it might be useful for me to talk about my own experience of facing discrimination and why this has made the documentary such an important topic for me. As some of you probably know, I'm somewhat infamous for my cannabis activism. Myself and my friend Gary, you know, everyone knows Gary. He's the guy who dresses up in the cannabis suit and goes to Parliament. We've been doing that. You know, I've been working with the guys for 6 years, of course, you know, to make the weed documentary, which just came out, you know, late last year and still circulating. But yeah, my own experiences of gender-based discrimination, well, they come under two categories, obviously, before I was out and after I was out. I was just thinking that even though obviously a lot of us, you know, particularly trans women, trans feminine, whatever you want to use as like a Western name, you know, a lot of us have closet stories, like literal stories about being in the closet and wearing a mum's clothes. You know, that's like one of the classic touchstones of the tranny stereotype book, but it's true. So, you know, people always say I was born gay, but there's this, even though that's actually also not entirely true, there is sort of a shift in consensus in that particular regard as well. But the shift in consensus for transgender stuff is towards the direction that we were born this way, or perhaps our third gender attributes were innate, would be a more accurate way of saying it. So let's go with the sort of pre-coming out era. Well, when I was a teenager, you know, which was 2007 through to 2014. So when I was still a teenager, yeah, the status of trans people was very much a question, but it wasn't like a we're going to accept them question. The acceptance came later. So, you know, when New Zealand psychiatrists decided to stop treating us like crazy people in 2019, that was the beginning, I think, of the acceptance era in trans rights. So, you know, before this time, I was well ensconced in the gay community from when I moved here, and I had trans friends and non-binary friends, and I just hadn't come out myself. So before then, I got a lot of flack for the perception that I was highly effeminate, even though no one was calling me trans. You know, I got called girls' names at high school, and when I went to uni, yeah, it just became more obvious, I suppose. So I never had to behave like a straight guy, so I didn't, and my guitar teacher Jane encouraged me to be less like a guy in my sort of my movements, not so much my thoughts, though also she had a very strong feminist influence, but she was a second wave feminist, so we had a bit of a tiff over my coming out. A lot of people in music thought that I'd gone insane. A lot of them thought it was a split personality, that I was unable to remember things like how to write a score of sheet music as Amanda, and so that, again, these are just instances of gender-based discrimination. It sounds just like my life story, but if you're actually listening, you'll be hearing that these are instances of gender-based discrimination. People didn't think my music had sophistication because I was feminine, and the music sounded feminine. So there was a lot of that going on when I was young, and yeah, also sort of people calling me girls' names, and like my friend saying during my first year of uni, well, you're more like a girl than a guy. So it kept coming up, and I firmly believe that one of my composition teachers really didn't want me as a student because I was different. You know, he wasn't into melodies, he wasn't into show tunes, and he suddenly didn't appreciate the attitude that I had. You know, the sort of the slightly the sort of drama geek attitude. So yeah, he wanted me to study with Gareth Farr instead, whereas I wanted to learn the theory. You know, I put up with the fact that I didn't like him very much because the theory that he taught was valuable, and I still think about that stuff. But yeah, it didn't really cut both ways, and he didn't have a lot of truck with what I was trying to do. So he didn't supervise me for half of my fourth year, and I consider that to be, in retrospect, about gender-based discrimination. About he didn't really want to supervise the kind of music that I was writing, you know, and was sort of putting it down by saying that it was feminine. And then after I came out, which was a few years after that, for starters, you know, I didn't even try to come out. I had a job when I came out. I was working for Icentia doing news briefings. I didn't even try to come to the office in a dress. That was obviously a non-starter because the room was a big open plan room, and there were these marketing ladies who clearly would have had a field day with with one of the editors wearing a dress. So I didn't even get to try it at that office. And yeah, so when I came out, it affected my opportunities significantly. I couldn't take certain classes, I couldn't do certain things. I had to stop going to the bathroom in public, for example, because of all the tension. So I very seldom go to the bathroom in a public place. And then when I was working at RNZ, I noticed that some of the people in the office were hostile towards me coming in the clothes. You know, they made up stuff like, oh, you need to wear a bra because we can see your tits. Whereas obviously, maybe you can, but that doesn't mean that I need a bra because my tits do not pass the pencil test. I've never had any hormone therapy treatments. And this is one of my things. When I came out with this. Better groomed, you know, proper beard. But the way I was treated like that was awful. I had parents shielding their kids from me in the streets. I had people insulting me at a bar. You know, I had all kinds of crap that did not happen when I was only wearing male clothes. So, yeah, I shaved the beard because people weren't going to tolerate me with it. And now, but that was about the only concession I was willing to make. You know, leg hair, for example, I'm not going to be shaving that just because people think I might look prettier, you know, with bare legs. So there's a lot of pressure to conform, a lot of pressure to be more like a woman in order to be accepted as one, that one encounters as a trans feminine person. And that again is gender-based discrimination, and it can also slide into hate speech, you know, like when Keaton, you know, a former flatmate threatened to kill me. You know, that's also in that same pattern of discrimination that all the trans people face. So I've been assaulted a couple of times, I've been indecently assaulted once. And this is despite the fact that, you know, I am almost asexual at the moment. I'm not really, I'm sort of demisexual overall. So I'm not just randomly attracted to people, or if I am, I wouldn't do anything about it unless I knew them personally. So, yeah, now I've lost my train of thought. I'm going to get a beer. And so I felt that at RNZ, it wasn't that they weren't willing to tolerate me as trans, and I did also have some other mental health issues, but those were related to the same pattern of gender discrimination. So, you know, I'm a filmmaker obviously for making a film, and I'd written a script, you know, which was about my own life. Oh, sort of. It was based on my own life, but it wasn't really my own life, and there was an interest in producing the screenplay. Because, you know, the film commission needed a box to tick, and a lot of people in Wellington saw this as an opportunity to strut their stuff and make a great gay musical with me, because I'm famous for making, you know, film musicals. And that didn't pan out. But there was a very distinct feeling that I got during that 6 or 8 months before things went up to a different level, that You know, that basically they were saying, because you're out in trans, the only thing that we can see you doing is playing a role where you're out in trans. We don't want you to direct, we don't want you to be involved with filmmaking, we want to exploit your voice and your image for money. That is what they meant, that is how they said it, you know, in my mind, but that is what they meant, is that they did not believe that any of my other script ideas were of any validity whatsoever, not least the one which actually had all the cool songs in it, because I was trans and therefore could only talk about trans stories. That's also not fair, that's also not reasonable. Cisgender men and women get to write diverse perspectives, admittedly less so now that everyone's half the identity politics bullshit, but yeah. So that is also gender-based discrimination, saying that my creative practice can only be limited to commentary on trans issues. You know, I take offence to that. So then obviously there was RNZ with the gender-based discrimination. So when it was becoming clear that I couldn't really fit in the workplace, I decided to you know, take some courses, and I took a course in Te Reo Māori last year with Māori, Mike, and he was really good, and he certainly didn't have a problem with calling me fire or, you know, sort of treating me in a feminine fashion. So I was disappointed last week to find that the kākua for the tikanga course that I was going to take couldn't treat me as a woman. She just fundamentally couldn't see me that way. She didn't and I don't think that, you know, telling her that I had some vague whakapapa and identified as whakawahine would have changed her view. She was very much spouting gender essentialist things. She was pointing at me. She was pointing at the unisex bathroom while looking at me while walking us around the campus. You know, she misgendered me, and as a result, I've had to leave the course because I just don't think I can take a course from someone who is unwilling to see me as a woman, and it's disappointing. You know, I thought I gave her some pretty good arguments about, you know, why all this gender essentialist nonsense that she was spouting was irrelevant, but she of course was defending me, saying, "Oh, but it's Māoritanga." Well, perhaps it is, perhaps it isn't, but what we were learning in the tikanga course that exact week was that tikanga is flexible, it does change. And, you know, she also introduced ritanga as a concept, you know, where you instantly change it. So that's basically what I think. I think that I'm very happy with how the complaint was handled. I'm going to take a different course, but I do think that it suggests to the wānanga, to wānanga o Aotearoa, that there needs to be some slightly more explicit language about how to treat gender diverse people in the classroom, so that there's no sort of ambiguity that allowed Rangi, the teacher, to be a bit rude to me, just to bait me, essentially. She also said some stuff about blood purity, about how pure her Polynesian whakapapa was, that obviously didn't, you know, land well with me, because you know, that's not, like, people consider me to be Māori in the sense that I sort of am acculturated to it, but I actually don't have any particularly strong whakapapa connections except on other branches of my dad's family tree. So I identify as Pākehā, but I grew up around lots of people, particularly, you know, not just white people, so I'm just more comfortable. And, you know, Riddell Productions kind of embraced that ethos to some extent. We all liked the sort of the casualness, and we tried to make films that reflected that. I'm a big fan of Māori filmmaking, actually. I like to watch short films, and I went and saw these really cool short films at the City Gallery 2 years ago. Some of that stuff showed up in the documentary, actually, that's why I'm mentioning it. So yeah, the influences of different cultures make me a different sort of trans person, because I don't look at it from a Butler type gender as a social construct delineated by performance and sedimenting. I mean, obviously those things are true, but they're not the entire picture of what makes a transgender or gender minority identity, because, you know, as I say, there's a social expression and there's a cultural dimension. So you express yourself in a certain way socially, and that does or doesn't resonate with the cultural dimension of what people in this particular context think men and women are supposed to do. So gender is not just a performance, it is other things as well. You know, without a cultural tradition, without a cultural construct of transgender identity, then one can't embody one. So that's my sort of basic view on trans as a sociological phenomenon. I might have to turn the tape off at this point. Come back for a second, go. Okay, well that's pretty much my story. I could add more, but I think that gets across the sort of the guts of it, that gender discrimination is ubiquitous. It happens everywhere. It's not one group, one gender of people. There's a wide variety of people who, both consciously and unconsciously, perpetuate gender stereotypes that harm the lives of gender diverse people. So yeah, let's go to talking about the documentary. So for those who are interested, full disclosure, so I've talked to Dave Armstrong, who I'm working on an opera with, and he said he'll put his name on the documentary to help us get some funding. And I've been talking to Paddy Gower for a number of years about projects, and he seems particularly interested in the trans project, so he might also support the application for funding. So yeah, if it gets off the ground, then we'll have a pretty good chance to actually get a team assembled, 5, 6, 7 people, and do some research, put some threads together, begin to shape the story that we're looking to tell. So that would be the goal for people who are thinking about what to talk about on Friday. I'll probably bring the camera, but I'm not going to use it, or maybe I might just film a couple of the lectures. But yeah, I don't want to be like constantly roving around with the camera. I'm just sort of bringing it because, well, I'm a filmmaker and I want to talk about the film, so I might as well bring the prop of the camera with me as well. I've got the new tripod, obviously, if you're watching this, so this is fine for sit-down interviews, but it's no good if we're going to do anything standing. It's only about 1.5 meters tall. Yeah, so it's pretty good though. So yeah, I'm sort of not sure how much money we might be able to get, but I think from looking around the film commission development funds, something like $50,000 or $70,000 perhaps to spend 8 months getting all the things into shape, getting some interviews together, finding all the archival material, yeah, and sort of getting all the old people excited about the project. Of course, chance to say something which is very specifically about Wellington's culture and trans rights, and where things were in the past and where they're at now, and what can we do to improve outcomes for gender diverse people. So that's like a theme in the documentary as well, and so is Debbie's private members bill about, well, it's not Debbie's one, it's originally Georgina's, but the private members bill that Debbie's sponsoring about protecting gender expression, gender identity and variations of sex characteristics in the Human Rights Act, particularly regarding employment, education and housing. So those will be the 3 main topics. Have you experienced discrimination in employment or education or housing or other? So it'll be pretty low key. It'll just be this. I might have a second camera if people on the team have their own stuff. It's pretty easy to match the cameras later on in colour grading, so don't worry too much about that. This is going to take a few years though, so just to put it out there, if the documentary is going to follow the private members bill, it's been drawn, hasn't been read yet, so there's got 3 readings and select committee stages to get through before it becomes law. That might take 2.5 or 3 years or longer. And I sort of got on the message from Ahi and company that they're very much not willing to let this law reform sit on the shelf. So the documentary has a political agenda, because obviously I can start releasing footage like this when I film it, and the political agenda is to pressure the left wing into making sure that this goes through. It's a conscience issue. We'll probably win the numbers in the first reading. Yeah. It's a conscience issue, so we'll probably win the numbers in the first reading because National can't be seen to be transphobic. But if the select committee is gamed with by the right wing in a careful way, they might actually be able to defeat it at a second or third reading. I don't really know what we can do to match with the money and the resources that Family First and Destiny Church and Speak Up for Women have. But I think there's some of the trans community groups are well funded, or at least appear to be from a distance. but yeah, getting some money to do this documentary would be great. I also have a second idea, which about how to work for trans rights, past the point of the documentary or past the development funding, which is that I formed a political party, and if my allies decide to become members, then we can eventually get a whole lot of money to run ads during the 2026 election, and trans and rainbow topics are probably going to be one of the things that we focus on. I mean, restoring relationships and sexuality education, improving outcomes for trans people by improving, the things to protect us from discrimination, which also includes the hate speech laws, which Debbie's office brought up with me as well. So another area of sort of serious law reform is that we need to be legally protected from hate speech. It's kind of easy for me to talk about this stuff because I came out after I'd already established my career. But I was only 24 or 25 when I came out, so it would be more charitable to say that I happened to be very successful, with the first two musicals, and I wrote those before I was 21, or just after I turned 21. So yeah, I sort of already established my career, and I thought that was enough, but it turns out it wasn't quite. So I still, I lost all my students when I came out as trans, so. And I've only had a couple since, one of whom was non-binary. So yeah, I lost a lot of the ability to make an income from my musical talents because I wouldn't perform as trans. Because people only wanted to see me being a drag queen. They didn't want to see me as a real person in real life wearing those real clothes at lunch or dinner, or God forbid at a social occasion. And as I say, as a result I've had fewer opportunities to mingle with the people in my community because there are some, stick in the mud, dyed in the wool pricks who just don't want me to be allowed to. But one thing which is new since I announced this documentary and began doing a bit more active trans advocacy is now I get hate mail. So that's another thing. As I say, hate speech, hate mail. Those things they're able to say that they're going to exterminate us, even though they didn't use those exact words. They use remove the modernist trans folk from our communities. That certainly sounded very much like putting us in concentration camps. So there might be some room to satirise those people in the documentary, but that would kind of take it away from the fact-based sort of journalistic point of view.
team who gets the funding, it's not just one person. And Jack's been important for that, and heaps of other people, many of whom are in this room. So, tēnā koutou katoa, ngā mihi ki GMA, thanks so much to all you folks for organising this event. Really appreciate the chance to be able to come together and share this.
Hei kurahi mā tātou, i tūrani nei, aroha atu, aroha mai, tātou i tātou katoa. Hui tātou. Sometimes, particularly for health things, we split whether you're a non-binary person assigned female at birth or a non-binary person assigned male at birth. They're clunky categories to use, but sometimes it's important to say actually some of this stuff is a hell of a lot harder for trans women. For example, we want to be able to pick out that stuff. This time, people gave us lots of words for their gender. People could pick lots of different English language words, as many as they wanted. They could pick them in other languages or write them in. These are some of the terms. Over the last year, 60% received negative messages on social media about trans people at least weekly. We can all just guess how that would have got worse since then, because all of the Posey Parker stuff was 2023 when we did this in 2022. Worried about that they'll be discriminated in job interviews, and this one at the bottom here, 40%, more than 40% avoided gender segregated exercise, because they're worried about how they will be treated. So it's all of those areas that we know are really, talked about a lot, and again, bathrooms, the real impact it has on people's lives. Family members using the correct pronouns, it has gone up from 39% in the first survey, now it's 62%. Oh, wow. But at the same time, the participants who said most or all of their family members were unsupportive of them has increased over that period. So the most are unsupportive or all are unsupportive are these bottom two ones. And the top colour is the recent survey. So both of these numbers have gone up. So that's 22% of 24%. Yeah, almost a quarter.
Yeah, and I think this one as well, it sounds like there might have been some family members, not necessarily all. And what we're seeing is perhaps a little bit of a divergence, so perhaps some more, as Jack pointed out, more unsupportive family members, but still keeping some supportive family members. So that polarisation that we're seeing out there, unfortunately, is affecting our families too.
And this one I feel connected to other trans and non-binary people, up from 54% to 69%. And I guess we know people who are isolated, and probably people who are really isolated didn't know about this survey. So, we're probably a bit biased towards the people who are connected and that they found out about it. But it's still, that gives me hope. I'm proud to be a trans woman, challenging at times with everything against us right now, but essentially proud. Gender euphoria is a time.
I think I introduced myself at the start. My name is Chase Fox. I work at Aotearoa. My job title on the bottom of my email signature is Grants Coordinator and Relationship Manager, which is just an easy way of saying I do a lot of spreadsheets, funding applications, and I go to all the meetings and presentations on things we don't want to do. Hence being voluntold to be up here today. So I kind of just had a bunch of hearings and bullet points on how we use the data from 2019 and a bit of information about how we probably use the data from this one going forward. My first heading is validation of what we know and hear from communities. So prior to the first count ourselves, we either just kind of had to say, my trans mates also agree that this thing is true, which doesn't hold a lot of weight. We use overseas stats, which isn't that helpful in New Zealand. We want to ask questions like, where do people need help? What geographic region do they need help in? Overseas stats don't help with that. Talking to your local trans mates don't help with that. Counting ourselves does. Things like, where do people need help? What do they need? What are the barriers to accessing the help they need? And who is most in need? All of that stuff is really hard to identify in a local context before counting ourselves maintaining. But now we can say this is the reality for trans people in New Zealand, and here's the data to prove it. We got invited to lecture at Victoria University on Masters Level Criminology paper last year. Half of what we talked about there were the stats. Most of the students there weren't aware of any of it beforehand. A lot of them were asking where do I go and read this online now? really helpful in meetings with politicians, particularly, the second or third meeting where they say, oh, I didn't realize this thing was an issue. And say, well, you told us that you read the report though, and it's in the report. Kind of a way of stopping them from easily out of, oh, I didn't know this, when no one's told me this is a problem, is to say, well, you were well aware it was a problem. And even at kind of like high level stuff, so 2019, we got to meet with the UN Special Rapporteur on housing. She was doing a report on housing and the housing crisis in New Zealand. We got to get like a copy of Counting Ourselves with bookmarks and highlights and everything into the hands of my sister and into references in the EU, which is pretty sick, if you ask me. Same thing with the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development. We got that into the minister's hands there. Next thing we know, trans people are named as a priority population in the Homelessness Action Plan 2020 to 2023. That's not something that happened before. And I think it's highlighted on one of these slides, like one of the recommendations is to name us as priority groups because it matters and how we have it. We can do that. Because there's a lot of things that's really hard to justify giving us the funding to people who don't think that we should exist, let alone have funding. I really like the quotes and the qualitative stuff that comes out of Counting Ourselves. Particularly like trans people are quite pathologized. It's always about diagnoses and all of this XYZ stuff. It's really nice to say, but there's this quote that talks about the real human experience in real New Zealand in this way. This is the real suffering of your peers or your co-worker or your sibling or your uncle rather than just a number on a screen somewhere. The one I'm using at the moment is I'm doing some work on alcohol harm. And there's not a lot of stats on alcohol harm for trans people in New Zealand. And in fact, the stats in Counting Ourselves show that trans people have lower rates of binge drinking. If I'm wrong about that, I'm going to look really silly. But in the quotes, there are quotes of trans people talking about how when they do use alcohol in unhealthy ways, it's to cope with negative media narratives about trans people. It's to cope with like negative social experiences because they are trans. So even though the stat itself doesn't say, trans people in alcohol rough time, the quotes do. And I really, really like to lay out that kind of stuff.
So it's called To Be Ourselves, Trans and Non-Binary People in Aotearoa, and it involves using the open text comments from the report, from the 2002 Counting Ourselves survey, to illuminate and foreground experiences of trans and non-binary disabled people. So we decided to collaborate with the Counting Ourselves team to write this report. Okay, so 42% of the participants in the survey were disabled, which is really high. That's 1,102 people. This involved a whole range of different types of disability. Many people had multiple forms, physical disabilities, chronic illness, mental health, and also neurodivergence. Basically, we distinguished these different things, many of which I think will be familiar to a lot of trans and non-binary disabled people. Those of you who can't read from there, there are things like face discrimination and accessing.
I need some hard copies of it as well. At the moment it's online, and we got it up there and got the glitch on the website sorted at 5 o'clock tonight, so it's easy to download it under the fact sheets. But I know we're at the end of that hour.
Yeah, so here I am back in Johnsonville after the Counting Ourselves meeting. It's pretty good. Only got to talk to one person afterwards though, because I've got to get some booze. The perfumed garden has been described as a panegyric of love, a song of sensual delights, a collection of joyous imaginings, a work of rare and curious erotic knowledge, a contribution to anthropological and ethnological research useful alike to the student of languages, Orientalism, and of psychology. It is all of these, and many respected and austere medical writers of today, owe something to the success of their own helpful and popular works to it. This edition is a reimagining by Amanda Michelina and Dave Armstrong, which is preceded by a new and brilliant introduction. Prelude. A narrator appears. Praise be given to God, who has placed man's greatest pleasure in the natural parts of woman, and has destined the natural parts of man to afford the greatest enjoyment to women. The kiss on the mouth, on the two cheeks, upon the neck, as well as the sucking up of flesh lips, are gifts of God, destined to provoke erection at the favourable moments. God also is it who has embellished the chest of the woman with breasts, has furnished her with a double chin, and has given brilliant colours to her cheeks. He has also gifted her with eyes that inspire love, and with eyelashes like polished blades. He has furnished her with a round belly and a beautiful navel, and with a majestic ass. And all these wonders are borne up by the thighs. It is between these that God has placed the arena of the combat. Resembling the head of a lion, it is called the vulva. Oh, how many men's deaths lie at her door, amongst them how many heroes. God has furnished this object with a mouth, a tongue, 2 lips. It is like the impression of the hoof of the gazelle in the sands of the desert. So let us praise and exalt him who has created woman and her beauties, with her appetizing flesh, a beautiful figure, a bosom with breasts which are swelling, and amorous ways which awaken desires. The Master of the universe has bestowed upon them the empire of seduction. All men, weak or strong, are subjected to a weakness for the love of woman. I, the servant of God, am thankful to him that no one can help falling in love with beautiful women. I testify that there is only one God, and that he has no associate. There is a story that once there lived a king named Mamum, who had a court full of the name of Bahlul, who amused the princes and viziers. One day this buffoon appeared before the king, who was amusing himself. The king bade him sit down, and then asked him, turning away, "Why hast thou come, O son of a bad woman?" Bahlul answered, "I have come to see what has come to our lord, whom may God make victorious." "And what has come to thee?" replied the king. "And how art thou getting on with thy new and thy old wife?" For Bahlul, not content with one wife, had married a second one. "I am not happy," he answered, "neither with the old one nor with the new one, and moreover poverty overpowers me." The king said, "Can you recite any verses on the subject?" "That is well," said the king. "Those who take refuge in God and his prophet, and then in us, will be made welcome. But can you tell me now some more verses about your two wives, and what comes to pass between them?" "Certainly," said Bahlul. "Then let us hear what you have to say." When Mamun heard these words, he began to laugh, till he nearly tumbled over. Then, as a proof of his kindness, he gave to Bahlul his golden robe, a beautiful vestment. Bahlul went in high spirits towards the dwelling of the Grand Vizier. Just then Hamdona looked from the height of her palace in that direction and saw him. She said to her negress, "By the god of the temple of Mecca, there is Bahlul, dressed in a fine gold-worked robe. How can I manage to get possession of the same?" The negress said, "O my mistress, you would not know how to get hold of that robe." Hamdana answered, "I have thought of a trick whereby to achieve my ends, and I shall get the robe from him." "Bahlul is a sly man," replied the negress. "People think generally that they can make fun of him, but for God it is he who really makes fun of them. Give up the idea, mistress mine, and take care that you do not fall into the snare which you intend setting for him." She then sent her negress to Bahlul to tell him that he should come to her. Hamdana welcomed him and said, "O Bahlul, I believe you come to hear me sing." He replied, "Most certainly, O my mistress, you have a marvellous gift for singing. I also think that after having listened to my songs, you will be pleased to take some refreshments." "Yes," said he. Then she began to sing admirably, so as to make people who listened die with love. After Balul had heard her sing, refreshments were served. He ate and he drank. Then she said to him, I do not know why, but I fancy you would gladly take off your robe to make me a present of it. O my mistress, I have sworn to give it to her whom I have done as a man does to a woman. Hamdana was the daughter of Mamum and the wife of the Grand Vizier. She was endowed with the most perfect beauty, of a superb figure and harmonious form. What price do you demand? She asked, to which he replied, Coition, O apple of my eye. You know what that is, O Balul, said she. By God, he cried, no man knows women better than I. They are the occupation of my life. No one has studied all their concerns more than I. I know what they are fond of. For learn, O lady mine, that men choose different occupations according to their genius and their bent. The one takes, the other gives. This one sells, the other buys. My only thought is of love, and of the possession of beautiful women. I heal those that are love-sick, and carry a solace in their thirsting vaginas. Hamdana was surprised at his words and the sweetness of his language. Could you recite me some verses on this subject? She replied. Certainly, he answered. Very well, O Balul. Let me hear what you have to say. Yeah, I haven't written that one yet. She requested him to divest himself of his robe and to come into her room, but Balul replied, I shall not undress until I have stated my desire, O apple of my eye. Balul examined the belly of Hamdana, round like an elegant cupola. His eyes dwelt upon a navel which was like a pearl in a golden cup, and descending lower down there was a beautiful piece of nature's workmanship, and the whiteness and the shape of her thighs surprised him. Then he pressed Hamdana in a passionate embrace, and soon saw the animation leave her face. She seemed almost unconscious. She had lost her head, and holding Balul's member in her hands, excited and fired him more and more. Balul said to her, Why do I see you so troubled and beside yourself? And she answered, Leave me, O son of a debauched woman. By God, I am like a mare in heat, and you continue to excite me still more with your words. And what words? They would set any woman on fire. If she was the purest creature in the world, you will insist on making me succumb to you by your talk and by your verses. Hamdana threw herself upon Balul, took his member between her hands, and began to look at it. She was astonished at its size, strength, and firmness, and cried, Here we have the ruin of all women, and the cause of many troubles. O Balul, I never saw a more beautiful dart than yours. Still she continued to keep hold of it, and rubbed its hand against the lips of the revolver, till the latter part seemed to say, O member, come into me. Yeah, so they have sex 3 times, then he gives her the robe. And at that point, the buffoon, being thus close to the door, the vizier and Hamdana's husband arrived, who said to him, Why do I see you here, O Balul? He answered, O my lord, I was passing through the street, when I was overcome by a great thirst. A negress came and brought me a cup of water. The cup slipped from my hands and got broken. Then our lady Hamdana took my robe, which the Sultan our master had given me as indemnification. Then said the vizier, Let him have his robe. Hamdana at this moment came out, and her husband asked whether it was true that she had taken the robe in payment for the cup. Hamdana then cried, beating her hands together, What have you done, O Balul? He answered, I have talked to your husband the language of my folly. Talk to him, you, the language of thy wisdom. And she, enraptured with his cunning he had displayed, gave him back the robe, and he departed. The story of the Negro Dorereme. The story goes, and God knows its truth, that there was once a powerful king who had a large kingdom, armies and allies. His name was Ali bin Direme. One night, not being able to sleep at all, he called his vizier, the chief of the police, and the commander of his guards. They presented themselves before him without delay, and he ordered them to arm themselves with their swords. They did so at once, and asked him, What news is there? He told them, Sleep will not come to me. I wish to walk through the town tonight, and I must have you ready at my hand during my round. To hear is to obey, they replied. The king then left, saying, "In the name of God, and may the blessing of the prophet be with us, and benediction and mercy be with him." His suite followed and accompanied him everywhere, from street to street. So they went on, until they heard a noise in one of the streets, and saw a man in the most violent passion stretched on the ground, face downwards, beating his breast with a stone and crying, "Ah, is there no longer any justice here below? Is there nobody who will tell the king what is going on in his states?" And he repeated incessantly, "There is no longer any justice. She has disappeared and the whole world is in mourning." The king said to his attendants, "Bring this man to me quietly, and be careful not to frighten him." They went to him, took him by the hand, and said to him, "Rise and have no fear. No harm will come to you." To which the man made answer, "You tell me that I shall not come to harm and have nothing to be afraid of, and still you do not bid me welcome. And you know that the welcome of a believer is a warrant of security and forgiveness. Then, if the believer does not welcome the believer, there is certainly ground for fear." And then there's some dialogue with the king, which is where the song comes in. "Show me the place," said the king, "and have no fear." The man answered, "So be it, as God's will." He then rose and walked before them. They followed him to a wide street, where he stopped in front of a house with lofty doors, the walls being on all sides high and inaccessible. They examined the walls, looking for a place where they might be scaled, but with no result. To their surprise, they found the house to be as close as a breastplate. The king, turning to the man, asked him, "What is your name?" "Omar bin Isad," he replied. The king said to him, "Omar, are you demented?" "Yes, my brother," answered he, "if it so pleases God on high." And turning to the king, he added, "May God assist you tonight." Then the king, addressing his attendants, "Are you determined? Is there one amongst you who could scale these walls?" "Impossible," they all replied. "Then," said the king, "I myself will scale this wall, so please God on high, but by means of an expedient for which I require your assistance, and if you lend me the same, I shall scale the wall, if it pleases God on high." Then they stand over each other's shoulders, and that's the song. So the king stands over 3 other guys to get over the wall, and I think that's doable on the stage, but the theatre geeks don't seem to agree. And then he said to his attendants, "Descend now from each other's shoulders." And they got down one after another, and they could not help admiring the ingenious idea of the king, as well as the strength of the choch, who carried 4 men at once. The king then began to look for a place for descending, but found no passage. He unrolled his turban, fixed one end with a single knot at the place where he was, and let himself down into the courtyard, which he explored until he found the portal in the middle of the house fastened with an enormous lock. The saloon was provided with gilt furniture, the splendour of which dazzled the eye. In fact, everywhere there were ornaments of all kinds. On looking closer, the king ascertained that round the tablecloth there were 12 maidens and 7 women, all like moons. He was astonished at their beauty and grace. There were likewise with them 7 negroes, and this sight filled him with surprise. His attention above all attracted by a woman like the full moon, of perfect beauty, with black eyes, oval cheeks, and a lithe and graceful waist. She humbled the hearts of those who became enamoured of her. Stupefied by her beauty, the king was as one stunned. He then said to himself, "How is there any getting out of this place? O spirit, do not give way to love." While the king was pondering how to escape his embarrassment, he heard one of the women saying to one of her companions, calling her by name, "Oh, so-and-so, rise and light a torch so that we too can go to bed, for sleep is overpowering us. Come, light the torch, and let us retire to the other chamber." The king hid himself to let them pass. Then, perceiving that they had left their chamber to do a thing necessary and obligatory in humankind, he took advantage of their absence, entered their apartment, and hid himself in a cupboard. Whilst he was hiding, the woman returned and shut the doors. Their reason was obscured by the fumes of wine. They pulled off all their clothes and began to caress each other mutually. The king said to himself, "Omar has told me true about this house of misfortune as an abyss of debauchery." But like that, but he pretends to be one of the women to steal their keys, and then he dresses as one of them and walks through to the saloon where Dorareme starts hitting on her because he's dressed in the clothes of the one that he wants to fuck. When Dorame leaves, the king goes on a hunt for the actual keys to the front door, and finds them, and then pretends to throw up, or faints to throw up to get out of being in bed with Dorame. The king then went to the inner door of the house and opened it. He closed it behind him, and so from one door to the other till he came to the seventh, which opened upon the street. There he found his companions again, who had been in great anxiety, and who asked him what he had seen. Then said the king, "This is not the time to answer. Let us go into this house with the blessing of God and with his help." They resolved to be upon their guard, there being in the house 7 negroes, 12 maidens, and 7 women, beautiful as moons. The vizier asked the king, "What garments are these?" And the king answered, "Be silent. Without them I should have never got the keys." He then went to the chamber where the 2 women with whom he had been lying took off the clothes in which he was dressed and resumed his own, taking good care of his sword. Repairing to the saloon where the negroes and the women were, he and his companions ranged themselves behind the door curtain. After having looked into the saloon, they said, "Amongst all these women there is none more beautiful than the one seated on the elevated cushion." The king said, "I reserve her for myself, and she does not belong to someone else." While they were examining the interior of the saloon, Dorame descended from the bed, and after him one of those beautiful women. Then another negro got on the bed with another woman, and so on until the 7th. They rode them in this way, one after the other, excepting the beautiful woman mentioned above, and the maidens. Each of these women appeared to mount upon the bed with marked reluctance, and descended after the coition was finished, with her head bent down. These negroes, however, were lusting after, and pressing one after the other, the beautiful woman. But she spurned them all, saying, "I shall never consent to it, and as to these virgins, I take them also under my protection." Dorame then rose and went up to her, holding in his hands his member in full erection, stiff as a pillar. He hit her with it on the face and head, saying, "6 times this night I have pressed you to cede to my desires, and you always refuse. But now I must have you, even this night." When the woman saw the stubbornness of the negro and the state of drunkenness he was in, she tried to soften him by promises. "Sit down here by me," she said. "Tonight thy desires shall be contented." The negro sat down near her, with his member still erect as a column. The king could scarcely master his surprise. Then the woman began to sing the following verses, intoning them from the bottom of her heart. "There is one among the men who want me that I yearn to mate with. He is full of courage, needs no allies nor no friends to wait with. Oh, think the things he'll do to me. As his manhood cries its tears, he'll soon leave his fire in me, as I shed my wordless fears. Then he'll start to kiss me, and I waken as his prick delights me. He'll begin retreating, but I'll stop him 'cause his knob excites me. Oh, you man of all men, oh, you soul of my soul, you must leave your cock in me, so the state stays free from more. Oh, he has sworn to give me endless pleasure, so I can't deny him. You are fools to think your bawdy antics could make me decry him." When she had finished, the king, in great surprise, said, "How lascivious has God made this woman?" And turning to his companions, "There is no doubt that this woman has no husband, and has not been debauched, for certainly that negro is in love with her, and she has nevertheless repulsed him." Omar bin Isad took the word. "This is true, O king. Her husband has been now away for nearly a year, and many men have endeavoured to debauch her, but she has resisted." The king asked, "Who is her husband?" And his companions answered, "She is the wife of the son of your father's vizier." The king replied, "You speak true. I have indeed heard it said that the son of my father's vizier had a wife without fault, endowed with beauty and perfection and of exquisite shape, not adulterous and innocent of debauchery. This is the same woman," said they. The king said, "No matter how, but I must have her." While this discourse was going on, the negro, Dorame, still desirous of obtaining the favours of that lady, said to her, I am tired of your lies, Obadiah Albador, full moon of the full moons, for so she called herself. At that moment, the king heard the lady say to the negro, "You are betraying your master with the vizier with his wife, and now you betray her, in spite of your intimacy with her and the favours she grants to you. And surely she loves you passionately, and you are pursuing another woman." The lady then rose and returned to the place where she had been before, and began. You will start to listen, oh you men. Woman's malice knows no bounds. Do not press your bonds of love just to hear her sexy sounds. She will fuck your servants and she'll like it as they lust for her cunt. She forgets her virtue and decorum when her lovers grunt. Long as she is in your bed, then you have her love, poor fool. Then she dismounts her steed as your love begins to cool. Fiends, if you're blinded by her love, then you're spellbound by this song. Any man with a heart should never trust our sex. For we're frail and changeful, vain and needy, lusting with our vulvas. That is our religion, please forgive me, that is why I spurn you. At these words the vizier began to cry, but the king bade him to be quiet. Then the negro recited the following verses in response to the lady. Of women we've had our fill, and their charms move not our souls. Men confide in us what they cherish. This is no lie. It's the end of your wishes as you fly from your husband, my virile Ude is your truth. With that, the negro threw himself upon the woman, who pushed him back. At this moment the king felt his heart oppressed. He drew his sword, as did his companions, and they entered the room. The negroes and women saw nothing but brandished swords. One of the negroes rose and rushed upon the king and his companions, but the chalk severed with one blow his head from his body. The king cried, "God's blessing upon you. Your arm is not withered, and your mother has not borne a weakling. You have struck down your enemies, and paradise shall be your dwelling in place of rest." The negroes, when they saw this, were cowed and silent, and the king, master now of their lives, said, "The man that lifts his hand only shall lose his head." And he commanded that the remaining 5 negroes should have their hands tied behind their backs. This having been done, he turned to Badr al-Badr and said to her, "Whose wife are you, and who is this negro?" She then told him on that subject what he had heard already from Omar. He then said, "How long can a woman patiently do without coercion?" She seemed amazed, but the king said, "Speak, and do not be abashed." She then answered, "A well-born lady of high origin can remain for 6 months without, but a lowly woman of no race nor high blood, who does not respect herself when she can lay her hand upon a man, will have him upon her. His stomach and his member will know her vagina. Then the king said, pointing to one of the women, Who is this one? She answered, She is the wife of the Qadi, and this one, the wife of the second vizier, and this, she is the wife of the chief of the muftis, and that one, the treasurers. And those 2 women that are in the other room? She answered, They have received the hospitality of the house, and one of them brought here yesterday by an old woman. The Negro has so far not got possession of her. Then said Omar, This is the one I spoke to you about, O my master. And the other woman, to whom does she belong? Said the king. She is the wife of the Amine of the carpenters, answered she. Then said the king, And these girls, who are they? She answered, This one is the daughter of the clerk of the treasury, this other one the daughter of the Mu'tazib, the third is the daughter of the Boab, the next one the daughter of the Amine of the Mu'eddin, that one the daughter of the colour keeper. At the invitation of the king, she passed them all thus in review. The king then asked for the reason of so many women being brought together here. Badr al-Budur replied, O master of ours, the Negro knows no other passions than for coition and good wine. He keeps making love night and day, and his member rests only when he himself is asleep. What does he live upon? Upon yolks of eggs fried in fat and swimming in honey, and upon white bread. He drinks nothing but old muscatel wine. She answered him, I have not been touched, and however long this might have lasted, the Negro would have not had his desire satisfied. Is this so? Replied the king. She replied, It is so. She had understood what the king wanted to say, and the king had seized the meaning of her words. Has the Negro respected my honour? Inform me about that, said the king. She answered, He has respected your honour as far as your wives are concerned. He has not pushed his criminal deeds that far. But if God had spared his day, there is no certainty that he would not have tried to soil what he would have respected. The king said, O Badr al-Budur, I like you. I have put the question to you in the name of the chosen prophet. Inform me of everything. You have nothing to fear. I give you the aman, complete. For I presume that none of you were out of reach of his attempts and had her honour safe. She replied, O king of our time, in the name of your high rank and power, look, he about whom you ask me, I would not have accepted as a legitimate husband. How could I have consented to grant him the favour of an illicit love? You appear to be sincere, but the verses I heard you sing have roused doubts in my soul. She replied, I had 3 motives for employing that language. Firstly, I was at that moment in a heat, like a young mare. Secondly, Iblis had excited my natural parts. And lastly, I wanted to quiet the Negro and make him have patience, so that he should grant me some delay, and leave me in peace until God would deliver me of him. The king said, Do you speak seriously? She was silent. Then the king cried, O Badr al-Budur, you alone shall be pardoned. She understood that it was she only that the king would spare from the punishment of death. He cautioned her that she must keep a secret, and that said he wanted to leave now. Then all the women and virgins approached Badr al-Budur and implored her, saying, Intercede for us, for you have the power of the king. And they shed tears over her hands, and in despair threw themselves down. Badr al-Budur then called the king back, as he was going, and said to him, O our master, you have not granted me any favour yet. How? Said he. I have sent a beautiful mule for you. You will mount her and come with us. As far as these women, they must all of them die. O our master, I ask you and conjure you to authorize me to make a stipulation which you will accept. The king made an oath that he would fulfill it. Then she said, I ask as a gift the pardon of all these women and all these maidens. Their deaths would moreover throw the most terrible consternation over the whole town. The king said, There is no might nor power but in God the merciful. He then ordered the negroes to be taken out and beheaded. The only exception he made was with the negro Dorerame, who was enormously stout and had a neck like a bull. They cut off his ears, nose, and lips, likewise his virile ure, which they put into his mouth, and then hung him on a gallows. At sunrise he sent a mule to Badr al-Budur, in order to let her be brought to him. He made her dwell with him, and found her to be excelling in all those who excel. Then the king caused the wife of Omar bin Izad to be restored to him, and he made him his private secretary. after which he ordered the vizier to repudiate his wife. He did not forget the Chok and the commander of the guards, to whom he made large presents, as he had promised, using for that purpose the negroes' hoards. He sent the son of his father's vizier to prison. He also caused the old go-between to be brought before him, and asked her, "Give me all the particulars about the conduct of the negro, and tell me whether it was well done to bring in that way women to men." She answered, "That is the trade of nearly all old women." He then had her executed, as well as all old women who followed that trade, and thus cut off in his state the tree of panderism at the roots, and burnt the trunk. He besides sent back to their families all the women and girls, and bade them repent in the name of God. This story presents but a small part of the tricks and stratagems used by women against their husbands. The moral of the tale is that a man who falls in love with a woman imperils himself and exposes himself to the greatest troubles. I don't know why she redesigned me. She likes the way she used to find me. She likes the girl I left behind me. I mean me. What did I have that I don't have? What did she like that I lost track of? What did I do that I don't do the way I did before? What isn't there that once was there? What have I got? A great big lack of something in me then she could see then beckons to her no more. I'm just a victim of time. obsolete in my prime, out of date and outclassed by my past. What did she love that there's none of? What did I lose the sweet warm neck of? Wouldn't I be the late great me if I knew how? Oh, what did I have I don't have now? What did I have that I don't have? What do I need a big supply of? What was the trick I did particularly well before? What did she see that's calling me? What did I use that now I'm shy of? Why is the sequel never equal? Why is there no encore? Weird. Can I go to repeat all the weird and the tear until I'm once again the previous me? What did she like that I'm not like? What was the charm that I've run dry of? What would I give if my old know-how still knew how? Oh, what did I have I don't have now?